have written in 2019 something like 15,000 papers in nanotechnology. And but how many patents have we filed out of all the knowledge that we have generated? 54 patents. Now look at US. US has published in the same year 23,999 papers and they are ranked second. But look at how many patents they have actually filed, something like 4,666 kind of patents. So that is the difference between a knowledge economy like US and an economy like India, which is good in generating knowledge, but very bad at converting that knowledge to wealth because we don't protect our IP well enough. So for example, in the US, for every 5 papers, they are filing almost a patent. And whereas in India, for almost like every 300 patent papers, we are filing 1 patent. So we need to, file more patents. We need to protect our IP more aggressively. And it's very important because unless you protect your IP, nobody will allow you to develop technologies and do anything else because somebody else will compete with you because you don't own the patent and someone else might actually do that and then block you from developing these technologies. So this is one major problem that needs to change. So we all need to protect our IP, more aggressively when it comes to that. This is also reflected in a like report, the Lux Research report, ranking the nation's nanotechnology shifting global players. So here again, they are plotting funding versus the technology development strength. And if you look at they have classified countries into 4 quadrants, the dominant players where all the technology development happens. And these are like US, Japan, Germany, South Korea. Whereas, countries like Japan, Germany, South Korea don't even write as many papers as we do. But then they file so many more patents and they are very successful in converting that knowledge into wealth. And for these are the dominant players. Where is India? India is in the minor league and at the bottom of this minor league. And that is a big challenge that we have. And of course, we are not spending enough money, but we are also very poor when it comes to developing technologies. Now, China is getting better. China spends much more money than we do. But China also struggles from the similar kind of a problem while, they are now, trying to catch up with the West. But otherwise, India, China, Canada, Australia, Russia, we are all in the same kind of a quadrant. So this is something that needs to change for India. India needs to move from this quadrant to the dominant kind of players, and that requires a lot of changes in the way we do research in the academia. Now, the new education policy. This has been a buzzword. Everybody is talking about it, and I call new education policy as Indian academia's moral movement. Now, what is moral movement? Now, if you look at it, as I have said, last 10 years, India's higher educational institutions have become more research oriented. So a lot of research and quality research is happening. However, the research in our academic institutions is still primarily driven by the North American and European models. Now, whatever happens there, we tend to pick up those areas. And then if they have published 10 papers, we write another 10 papers. And that is how we tend to, do most of our research. So we are mostly the followers when it comes to doing research. But is it that every country is like this? For example, if you look at the US in 1800s or in the 19th century, the US universities were also like the Indian educational institutions. In 1800s, for example, all these good colleges in the US, they followed the England and Germany. At that time, if you look at all the early Nobel Prizes, England and Germany were the rulers basically. So they used to get almost all the Nobel Prizes, and US universities were following England and Germany. And England and Germany, a lot of research that was happening was in classics, theology, or in natural sciences, the physics, mathematics kind of areas. So US universities were also following what was happening in the England and Germany kind of places. So that was how they were following England and Germany, and now we follow US kind of thing. So what has changed for the US? I mean, from being the followers, suddenly in 21st century, how did they become the world leaders in almost every technology? The change happened because of, at least the origin of this change lies in what is known as the Morrill Act, and which was what was also known as the Land Grant University Act in the US, and which was passed in 1860. What did this Morrill Act actually say? Morrill Act said that, for the government to support these institutions, for them to receive any support from the institutions, these universities need to work on such branches of learning as are related to agriculture and the mechanic arts. So meaning they said that if universities solve the society problems, then they can receive this funding from the state and they can receive land from the state, and that is how the state will support these institutions. So what did happen because of that? Because of this, basically the US universities started connecting with the societal problems much better, and in the process of connecting with the societal problems, they also started to look at how they can improve, whether it's industrialization or solving industry problems, solving manufacturing problems. All of that started to happen because the universities did not live in silos. They rather started to focus on the solving the real problems that existed in the society. So that was one change that took place in the US as part of the Morrill Act. And that, to me, the new education policy actually, talks about all the right things. And to me, the new education policy, if implemented well, if implemented in the right spirit, it can be our moral movement. And some of our research, needs to become top down. Most of the research I classify, what is happening in our institutions is you are developing solutions which are looking for a problem. So these are all, so there are solutions available. Then you try to see where can I apply that solution. What is required actually is a solution to a problem. So I think from that solution looking for a problem to solution to a problem is what we need to be actually doing in our educational institutions, and new education policy that way is a step in the right direction, and that is what hopefully will happen in the near future. And so therefore there are multiple initiatives of Government of India to do that, and that is what we need to be doing. And if you look at the higher educational institutions, there are three aspects to that. The first aspect is education, of course, imparting the knowledge to the students, and that is knowledge dissemination. The knowledge is available somewhere, and you disseminate that knowledge to the students. Now that is what is education, and we do a pretty good job, I guess, when it comes to the knowledge dissemination. The second aspect is knowledge generation. So where you are generating new knowledge now, and that is also the R&D. I showed you that India does very well. We are ranked third in the world when it comes to knowledge generation. So but we want to be like the US, and we don't want to remain at the third position. So knowledge generation and the translating that knowledge into wealth and solving societal problems is something that we want to do. And then the third aspect is innovation. How do you define innovation? Innovation here is defined as application of your knowledge, to a real world problem or generating value for your research. Otherwise, what is the value of your research? You do some research, you spend money, and then you publish a paper. But what is the value of that paper? I mean, in what way has it improved, anything for a common man? I think so that value generation happens through the innovation. So when knowledge, tries to solve a problem, tries to improve things, that is when you say that innovation has now taken place, and this is something that needs to happen. When will knowledge become innovation? Knowledge will become innovation when your research has relevance to the society. If you are working on a problem, which doesn't even exist in the society, I think that is, you can do that as a researcher. There is nothing wrong in doing basic research and blue sky research. Some people must be allowed to do so, and some people, should be continued to do that. But what I'm talking of here is like the IITs, which are technology institutes, and then we need to be solving problems. We need to be developing technologies. So therefore, when you talk about R&D here, I call R&D as relevance. That how much of your research is relevant to the society, and I mean, are you solving a problem by which can make life easier for a common man? So that is when the innovation actually happens. And once you provide a solution, you need to also deliver it to the society, and you need to ensure that this solution eventually reaches the people, and that can be through working with the industry, where you do a technology transfer kind of a thing, or through a startup. You might start a company out of your technology, and that way also you can solve the people's problem. So therefore, the relevance and delivery, when you bring into your research, that is when the innovation will thrive, and that is what we need to be doing as academic institutions or as institutions like IITs. Now, what is happening today when you talk about relevance or when you talk about delivery? How does it happen? So now, how do you actually do research at a place like IIT today? Much of this research problems, we pick up from the library, right? The first thing any student would do in our institutions is, joins PhD first semester, second semester. It just goes in doing a literature review, meaning to identifying a problem. So how do you identify problems? Most of our problems are identified from the library by reading research papers, by looking at what others have done and what is not done. And then, so these problems originate in library, and very often, they go as, they just end up in library. That's because you would have seen that, all this is done, this is not done. So you do that and publish more papers. Those more papers go into library, and so therefore the research that originates in library also ends up in library, and which is the case with 70 to 100% of our problem, depending on which institute you go to. I think anywhere from 70 to 100% of problems, basically are picked up by reading papers. What can be the other way you can pick up the right kind of problems? By observing issues in the society. So now here again, how do you do that? So immersion program. So you for example go to hospitals and try to work with doctors, understand their problems, and see how you can provide a solution to those problems. So these are like the immersion programs or the rural internships, or we started a program called grassroots innovation program. So some of these are ways to connect with the society, and then by observing issues in the society, you want to pick up a problem and then come back and use all the resources available in an academic institute to solve those problems. And even humanities and social sciences departments also play a very big role in identifying the right set of problems. So they have a major role to play, because the humanities faculty members are often times much better connected with the society in understanding the societal issues. So they translating those problems to and educating the engineers about them, engineers devising technologies to address those problems. That is how that healthy interaction needs to happen between humanities departments and the electrical or the engineering departments or science departments and all other departments. The other way you can bring relevancy is by working closely with the industry, so that if you have that close connections with the industry, whatever problems they may be facing, and you are the first one to know, therefore you pick up those problems and provide a solution. But this kind of interactions with industry should not be in a transactional kind of a mode. They should be more in a collaborative kind of a mode. So industry gives you the problems that they are facing, which are 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, and visualize what kind of things they want to do, see what sort of things they would like to develop as technologies, as know-how, as ideas, and then engages with the academia. So here again we started multiple programs to increase industry interactions at IIT Delhi, the professors of practice positions, the centers of excellence, the R&I park, which you now see, the brand new, the best looking building on the campus is an R&I park, where industries come and set up their research centers. The industry day, as you know, IIT Delhi organizes industry day every year. Joint appointment with faculty do taking sabbaticals to spend time in the industry, Prime Minister's fellowship scheme for the PhD students, FIRE program, which is to turn faculty into entrepreneurs, faculty innovation and research driven entrepreneurship. We also started an incubator for PhD students. So these are all the ways through which you connect with the industry. You improve your delivery mechanism so that the research that happens eventually sees the light of the day and people benefit from that. The other way to bring relevancy is by working with the strategic agencies. If you look at DRDO, ISRO, DAE kind of organizations, their goal is to develop technologies for all these sectors. So now can IIT Delhi connecting with or our institutions connecting with these agencies, picking up their problems and seeing how they can assist them in developing those technologies or solutions is another way you can make your research relevant. At IIT Delhi, for example, as many of you know, we have very close collaborations with DRDO. In fact, we have more projects with DRDO right now at IIT Delhi than all other institutes combined together. And that's because we have a joint advanced technology center at IIT Delhi, and there are at least 100 faculty members at IIT Delhi working on the DRDO defined funded problem. Same thing is happening with ISRO. We have created an ISRO cell, and this cell is again connecting our faculty and students with the ISRO problems. So this is how you also bring in relevance. So I think moving a library should not be the only avenue for you to pick up problems. So pick up the research problems we need to generate by observing with society, the societal kind of problems, by interacting with industry or by engaging with the strategic agency. So this is one change that we try to bring about at IIT Delhi, and a lot of things are now changing, because of that. So having said that, if you look at technology platforms, where do you see, what technologies do you see will impact the world the most in the next, let us say, 20 to 25 years? Nobody can predict beyond 20, 25 years anyway. So, but if you look at, I call them the 5 T's, the 5 technology platforms. What are these 5 technology platforms? One is information technology. Now you see that information technology is there everywhere. Whether you go to agriculture or to an IT company or to a textile company, everywhere, the IT is now integrated into all of this, and India is a world player in IT. So, for example, in 2019, our IT exports were 137 billion US dollars, and in 2019, for example, Saudi Arabia exported as much of crude oil as we exported the IT services. So just to give you a perspective, India is a major nation when it comes to the information technology. The second major technology vertical is the biotechnology. Now you all know that India is a world player. We are the pharmacy of the world. While we are not only the office for the world, we are also like the pharmacy for the world. And every third or fourth medicine that is sold in the US or UK is actually manufactured out of India. So India is the largest provider of generic drugs globally. The third technology is the nanotechnology, which is again a kind of a platform, and nanotechnology can be applied to healthcare, to security, to agriculture, to what have you. Everywhere nanotechnology will play a role, and India is ranked third in the world when it comes to knowledge generation. And this is where we need to now translate that knowledge into products of societal requirement. I work in the nanotechnology area. I will give you some examples out of my own work, how this translation can happen and how these things can be done from the country. The fourth is the cognitive technology platform. This is where AI, ML kind of areas come in, and India is doing very well. We are actually third in the world when it comes to the number of papers written with the AI, ML in them. And we are also fifth in the world when it comes to citation. So therefore, India is also doing pretty well when it comes to AI, ML kind of research. The fifth is the quantum technology, the future, whether you call it sensors or communications or computing, quantum computers, quantum sensors, quantum, everywhere now you are talking of the quantum technologies here. So therefore, this is another platform technology which is emerging now, where India needs to play a major role. So like IT, how it has become all pervasive, like the BT, which the biotechnology, which you see everywhere in our lives now. In the next 2 decades or so, you will see nanotechnology, cognitive technologies, and quantum technologies becoming almost similar to the IT and BT category. And that is what hopefully will happen, and India will be a world player in all of these technology domains and apply these technologies to multiple sectors. Like I said, from textiles to computers, everywhere you should have some of these technologies playing a role. And I promise nanotechnology is my area of research. I will quickly, in another 10 minutes or so, just show you, how one can develop products out of nanotechnology. So the nanotechnology, I will not get too much into that, but if you look at the sensors, is one area where nanotechnology can play a very major role. if you look at any electronic device today, the electronic devices have all of these, we have basically 6 different kinds of sensors as humans, the sight, hearing, and then the touch. But then, you also have smell and taste, which the electronics cannot do. There is nothing like your phone cannot smell things, your phone cannot also taste things. But the proprioception is like the GPS in our brain. The phones already have excellent GPS capabilities. Phones know their location and all of that. Therefore, out of the 6 sensors, the 4 are already captured very well by the electronics. The 2 sensors which are not captured in any electronic gadget are the smell, the electronic nose, or tongue, the electronic tongue kind of platform. So this is where the nanotechnology can help. Now, by using by regular technologies, you could not have developed some of these, but thanks to nanotechnology, the large surface areas which are possible, now you can actually start smelling things, down to parts per billion or even better by using the electronic nose kind of platform. So this is what we set out to do. I had a major research project in order to develop an electronic nose kind of a platform. And so we started applying them to different technologies. Like I said, there are lots of problems that you can pick up by just observing issues in the society. So you don't need to, to find a problem. You don't have to go to US, or you don't even need to go to library. You can just look around you. You will find tons of problems. Agriculture, there are so many technologies agriculture requires. Healthcare requires major, improvements in yield and other things. And the security is a concern. Energy is a concern. Saving water is such a big problem. I think therefore there are tons of problems which you can work on and then apply these technology platforms and then develop solutions which do not exist currently in the world. So that is what one should be able to do. And also, when you develop these technologies, you need to keep in mind the fact that the world is not a very rich place. Not many people can afford the iPhones and iPads and all of that. In fact, this World Bank Atlas, if you look at 80% of the world's population, they make less than $10 a day. All the salary they make in a month is something like $300 kind of a thing, and that's all the money 80% of people actually make. And they are not the people who are the customers for all those high-end kind of gadgets. Their requirements are different and their needs are different, and that is what we should be able to solve by using some of these kind of technology platforms. So I started working, I started my career at IIT Bombay, as many of you know. I spent 18 years at IIT Bombay as a faculty member. So now some of the problems I took up were by observing things in the society, my interactions with medical doctors along with my team members at IIT Bombay. So we wanted to develop a cardiac diagnostic system, a kind of a very low cost diagnosis method through which you can detect heart attacks, meaning even before a heart attack occurs, can you actually diagnose the heart attack? So that you predict heart attacks, before they occur, just by simple blood tests kind of a thing. If you are feeling, chest pain and not feeling very well, you do this test, and these tests will tell you whether you are going to have a heart problem or whether the chest pain that you are having is not because of any heart related kind of ailments. And why do you need to do this? Because India, every third death today happens because of heart related issues. So every 30% of Indians die because of heart attacks. And if you can predict heart attacks, you can actually save so many lives. But how do you predict these heart attacks? So you need to detect certain proteins in the blood like troponin, CKMB, myoglobin kind of markers. And these are all the proteins that express in the blood when you have a cardiac kind of a problem, when you have the myocardial infarction, when the cardiac muscles are dying, they release certain markers. And by measuring these markers, you can actually diagnose, detect the heart attacks very early before they occur. How do you do that? You have a simple chip, a kind of like the glucose sensor. So you have a strip where you apply blood, and then you have a tabletop system or a handheld system, which actually you insert that strip, and then it measures the marker concentrations, and through that it can actually tell you whether you are going to have a heart attack or not. How do you do that? So we did that by using these cantilever kind of platforms. So these are all the piezo-resistive cantilever platforms where any surface reaction between an antibody and then an antigen, which is the protein that you are trying to detect. So these proteins bind to these antibodies, which are coated on the surface of a cantilever. When these proteins bind to these antibodies, the reaction is what you detect electrically. So that is the platform that we built, and then so I will skip some of these details because we did a lot of work on that. You can find it in my publications and all that. So we actually developed the prototype for this. So this is a prototype for detecting the cardiac markers through which you can predict or detect the heart attacks much early. And so this is a technology platform that we developed, and then we transferred this technology to a startup, NanoSniff. We also did much more work at IIT Bombay on the cardiac kind of problems. So once we did that, then another problem we took up, using a similar platform was to detect the presence of explosives at the airports or in the bags, or when somebody is carrying some material, can you sniff explosives, the electronic nose kind of platform. So we use a similar cantilever kind of platform, but the receptors here, in the earlier case, there were antibodies which bind to protein, but here you are detecting explosives. So you generate receptors here, and these receptors are the ones which can bind selectively to vapors of explosive, and the binding is what you detect electrically. So we again worked on the molecular recognition of explosives. So we did again a lot of work on this. We developed an electronic nose platform for detection of these explosives, and then we did a lot of pattern recognition algorithms. So a lot of work went into that, and then we finally, I'll skip that in the interest of time, but we finally launched this as a product. Government of India, Ministry of Education launched it because it was developed, from IITs, and so this particular technology now is commercially available, so that you can buy that on the GEM portal, and you can buy it from the NanoSniff. And this product is known as NanoSniffer, and it's a completely disruptive technology. So there is nothing like that exists in the market right now using this principle. It's a micro sensor based explosive detector, costs 1/5 that of what the commercial detectors cost, and even in terms of maintenance, pretty inexpensive, can detect explosives within 10 seconds or so. So this is a technology complete product that we were able to develop, and that came about because of our interactions with the security agencies. And so similarly, we started working with now we are making that explosive detector into an IoT node, Internet of Things kind of a node, and the goal is to put it into buses, trains, and protect all these transport systems and the public places and all of that. And one of the challenges we faced here was to power the IoT node. How do you power this? In the buses and trains, for example, there are vibrations, and we said, can you convert those vibrations into electrical energy so that this sensor will work, just from the vibrations present in the buses and trains. So that was a kind of a technology. For that, we started working on the piezoelectrics, and we developed lots of piezoelectric materials. This is a more recent paper where we developed lead-free piezoelectrics and then published some papers to show that it actually is better than anything that one knows today as a piezoelectric material. And then of late, we are working with agricultural sensors between IIT-Delhi and IIT Bombay. So there is a major activity now to work on agricultural sensors. The government of India has given the soil health cards to farmers. Now we are developing sensors for the farmers to be, to enable the farmers to fill up all these values in the soil health card without having to send the soil anywhere. And in the field itself, can you actually do the detection for all these micro and macronutrients? So that's what we are developing. And then there are 4 prototypes we built: volatile tracking, pathogen detection, moisture, pH and salinity, micro and macronutrients. And then so here again we started a company, Soil Sense. This is my second startup. So now this company is actually selling the soil health sensors. Now they done quite a bit of progress. They have 140 installations right now in the country where the sensors are deployed, and they can measure multiple markers in the soil using a complete weather station kind of a thing. And they have done multiple tests, for different crops. So this is a process. So you pick up a problem, put multidisciplinary teams together, and then develop a prototype, and then use startup as a way to take it to the market. And in the process, you of course write lots of good papers. You also file patents before you let out that knowledge into public domain, and that is how you basically, it's like a patent, publish and prosper kind of a model. And many of these are now commercially available, and these two startups have we are pretty well growing kind of startups which are now selling these technologies and products that we have developed, soil sense and nanosnip. And so we are working further to improve on these. But therefore, if you look at it, India is opportunities. So there are approaches like micro fabrication, batch processing. They are ideally suited for meeting the cost and power requirements, and addressing the bottom of the pyramid is important because that is where the markets are. And if you develop technologies for the farmers, 50% of Indians actually work in farming, and that is where the real markets are. The business model innovation is required for meeting the cost and maintenance requirements. Calibration is also a key challenge. So therefore, you must develop these technologies so that in India they will be able to function and meet the requirements. The local R&D for product development is essential toward meeting the cost, and that is what we have demonstrated. And fortunately, there are multiple Government of India initiatives for startups now. So one should make use of these schemes for doing that. And therefore innovation for the education and research is happening, but for innovation to thrive on our campuses, the top-down product-oriented approach is the key. So that we need to be, we need to start with a problem and then put teams together to develop solutions. We can work on the platforms development, and that is where you can write papers, and then you can also file many patents. So protecting the IP as early as possible is very important, because if you are not protecting IP and only publishing papers, then somebody else will use that knowledge and sell you back the systems. So therefore, protecting IP is very important. And then you need to mature the technology in an academic environment, given the lack of ecosystem for VC funding for technology startups. VCs usually want to fund in areas, domains where there are quick returns. Unfortunately, developing a product takes a longer period, at least 5 to 10 years from an idea to a complete prototype or a product. I think those 5 to 10 years kind of a time frame, there may not be many returns that the VCs will have, and therefore they don't like to do that. But fortunately now given the Government of India support for the deep tech startups, I think things are definitely getting better and better. And therefore, we should use the government sources of funding for developing these kind of solutions. And professors and students alone cannot build a company. You need to build a complete team. The team usually will have people who are good in marketing, people who are good in fundraising, good in writing business proposals. So you need a complete team to do that, and at IIT Delhi, FITT provides you that support. The work towards the increasing the value of equity, not fighting for the equity. I think these are reasons why many startups fail, because the founders start fighting among themselves for higher equity and all that. I think here increasing the value of equity is indeed pretty important, and involving students is very important in these enterprises, and that can be a strong motivation for many of them. So therefore, students need to be playing a bigger role, and we need to look for areas where there is a great domestic market, like I told you, agriculture or healthcare or security. In all these areas, India has a major kind of a market, and that is where one can actually do that. And this is also something that we have been doing at IIT Delhi. So for example, I think the institutions need to become like the idea factories. Now, what are the idea factories? When do you generate new ideas? New ideas come about when unlike minds come together, when people who don't think alike, when they form teams, when they start discussing with each other, that is when you will see, lot of innovation happening. That is when you see a lot of ideas, coming about, and the innovation thriving on such campuses. When I say unlike minds, people with different cultural backgrounds. At IIT Delhi, we have consciously tried to increase the international student population on the campus. So now we have major initiatives for scholars from all over the world to come and study at IIT Delhi. do research at IIT Delhi. I think when people with such diverse cultural backgrounds collaborate, that also opens up avenues for the researchers. People with different disciplinary training, another unlike minds. We did so many initiatives at IIT Delhi to bring people from different disciplines together. We also started School of Interdisciplinary Research, and in all of these schemes now, with which we are connecting with multiple institutions in Delhi and around areas. So this is again a way to bring different disciplines together, different attitudes. This is again the industry connect, because industry people who work in industry come with a different, ask very different kinds of questions. So we have also done everything possible to bring people with different attitudes together and then make them work as a team. And then once you generate those ideas, create an ecosystem for startups. I think that is where central facilities, space, faculty appraisals, the R&I park, all of these are ways through which we are actually creating high-tech kind of startups. And this has definitely yielded a lot of results for IIT Delhi. We have seen an order of magnitude increase in the way, the output from all of these kind of initiatives. So that is what institutions need to be doing. And even during the COVID time, all that IIT Delhi has done, has benefited at least like a 15 million people have benefited from the IIT Delhi technologies, whether it is a low cost RT-PCR kit or a antigen kit or, all these masks, the advanced masks. I think with all of that, we have been able to touch many lives through the innovation that happened at IIT Delhi. And even the FITT at IIT Delhi has multiple schemes. If you are looking at converting your knowledge to wealth, I think you should make use of the FITT support for immersion, ideation, for product development, for pilot scale, for market entry, training and mentoring, innovation award. There are multiple ways FITT supports entrepreneurs and students, faculty on the campus. But FITT is also an open innovator, an open incubator. Anybody in the country can actually avail the services of FITT, the IIT Delhi incubator, and so therefore it's serving the needs of the country. So this is my last slide. So I think reinventing institutions for Atmanirbhar Bharat, one thing which is very important is we need to become multidisciplinary. We need to be locally engaged and then globally networked, which is very important. Because working on the local problems is equally important. Having innovation and entrepreneurship as major drivers, and a demonstrator for conversion of knowledge to wealth. And we also need a diversified financial structure, student-centric and a flexible curriculum tightly integrated with out-of-class learning, which is important. Having a major chunk of curriculum dedicated to social sciences, ethics, leadership skills, all of that is important. Having a diverse set of faculty, for example, the professors of practice we started is a step in that direction. So not all faculty need to be pure academicians. There need to be people who have large, long industry experience coming and serving IIT as a faculty member. So that's also something that we have done. And having hubs for industrial R&D, the R&I park now is serving as a hub for industrial R&D. And these are the ways, we can transform our institutions to become relevant in the 21st, to remain relevant in the 21st century, and also contribute to the Atmanirbhar Bharat vision. So I will stop here and thank you very much. I will now unshare my presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. It was indeed a very inspiring presentation. So now I would request the participants to please ask a few of the quick questions. So maybe you can just raise up your hands, then the coordinators will unmute you, and then you can ask the questions to sir. So we have one question in the chat box. So somebody is asking, sir, could you please give us any information if the Indian government is working with Indian institutes on the projects to the presence of microplastics or nanoplastics in food, water, soil, and air?
There is some very interesting work happening on microplastics at IIT Delhi. You should contact Professor Pant, K. Pant, in the Department of Chemical Engineering. and he's working with multiple government of India agencies in addressing that problem. He has a technology to convert plastics to oil, and he has prototypes now. He's also working with Delhi Municipal Corporation for that. So we should contact Professor K.C. Pant from Chemical Engineering Department at IIT Delhi.
Thank you, sir. So in the meanwhile, the participants are turning up with the questions. So we have another question, which is like just getting your opinion. Like, is there any advantage in teaching engineering and technology sciences in the mother tongue in the context to NEP? Or do we have any insights from the other countries like Germany and Japan?
I think this mother tongue or foreign tongue, English is mother tongue for many Indians. I look at English as one of the Indian languages now. So I think we have our own ways of speaking English, and I think whatever name you give to that English, whatever it is, I don't see English as a foreign language anymore. I think at least I don't. And I have studied in Telugu medium. It's not that I have been born and brought up in English kind of education or anything. Until my 12th standard, I studied in Telugu medium. It took me 6 months to 1 year to actually learn English, and so that was okay. And but one thing which should not happen is someone who is not good in English should not lose out on any opportunities. I think just because of language, one shouldn't miss out on any opportunities. As educational institutions, we need to put in place the support structures for all students, who are not conversant in English, so that they are provided the necessary help and support, so they can move to English in a matter of 6 months to 1 year or whatever time that it takes, which is what I did. Until 12th, I studied in Telugu medium. In my BTech, I had to learn English, and it was a struggle initially, but it took me about 6 months to 1 year to become completely conversant in English. And I think that is what can happen. If you are bright and if you are committed, and if you have that zeal in you to do well, I think language will never become a barrier. And but having said that, like I said, no one should be denied opportunities, because he or she cannot speak English. And I think conducting our entrance examinations in multiple languages is something that we should do. And once they enter IITs, provide them all the necessary help so that they become conversant in English is also something we should do. And people give me, this example of Germany, Japan. Germany is like one state in India. Japan is like one state in India. India, you should always compare it with Europe. We are like Europe. There are so much of diversity in India as it exists in Europe, and with so many languages, I think we need more unifying kind of forces. No, not forces which divide us further. I think I strongly believe India should never be compared with Germany or Japan. We are like Europe. We are like a continent of ourselves, and also the reason why these countries have developed or prospered is not because they have got educated in their local language. Many of these countries are slowly moving to English now. In Germany, most of the higher education now has already moved to English, and same is happening in other countries too. And they have developed because they have invested in science and technology. Look at as a percentage of GDP terms, how much Germany spends, how much South Korea. South Korea spends 4% of their GDP on higher education. India spends, something like 0.6% of its GDP on higher education. So I think the investments that they have made into the science and technology culture, the science and technology ecosystem is what has made these countries develop now. Not because they have been, educating or they were educating children in the local language and all that. I think, I don't subscribe to that view at
all. Thanks a lot, sir, for your views onto this question. So most of the faculty members who are joining as a participants in this program, they are asking one questions like, what would be your suggestions to do a patent oriented or a product oriented research for an institute which is having not so much of funding, like which is not so well to do in terms of funding? So what are your suggestions on to that?
I think, funding will come. Most of our research we did not, institutes did not provide us any funding. We came up with a good problem statement, and we put a good team together. So once people saw that we have a good problem to work on, and we also have a good team to, to work on that problem, many agencies were willing to fund us. I think that is how research works. You don't, IIT doesn't fund any research, even in Delhi or Bombay. IIT hardly has given us any funding for doing this research. I think this funding comes from agencies like Department of Science and Technology, or DRDO, or ICMR, or other ICAR. I think some of these agencies provide that funding, and so for that you need a good project definition and you need a good team. I think once you have these two, funding will come.
So I think so. We have just one more question by one of our participants. The question is, how do you see the blockchain transforming India in the next 10 years?
I think blockchain is another technology which has huge potential. It's basically, whether you want to digitize your land records and ensure that there is a seamless kind of a transition, or for organic foods you want to the entire supply chain you want to digitize. I think the applications are again in almost every domain. And India, I think unfortunately blockchain got a bad name because of cryptocurrencies and all that. But blockchain as a platform has tremendous potential. And as a country, I think we seem to be realizing slowly what blockchain can do. And I think we need to use blockchain for multiple sort of purposes, whether it is the land records or tracking the food chain to ensure that the quality is maintained, and the certifications are given based on some validation. I think it has tremendous potential, and I see a tremendous scope for blockchain for a country like India.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. So I extend my sincere gratitude to you, sir, for taking out time out of your busy schedule and to grace this event. I hope your words have truly inspired all of our participants, and we do look forward to hear from you, sir, on our forthcoming events also. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you. Talking to all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. So this is all for the today's session. So we would be meeting tomorrow for the second lecture by Professor Jagdish Kumar, respected Chairman UGC, at 4 o'clock tomorrow. And we hope to see you all tomorrow by this time. Thank you for joining us today. Please take care and goodbye.